Liz, why don't you talk a little bit about something that some people have been looking at for the past few weeks as we've been promoting our BNI convention.
Thank you, Steve. One of the things that struck me is in the run-up to the BNI convention was the number of people who had been tapped to be keynoters who were also authors. And if you look at the screen, you see many people here who are the keynoters, world-class speakers, are authors, and have copies of the book covers, probably their most recent book, with them. And of course, we know that Dr. Ivan Misner is a prolific author, not only by himself, but as a collaborator. And 60% of these world-class speakers are in fact published authors, at least one book under their belts.
Right. Okay, so let's take a quick poll. Curious to see if you were able to do it and you were excited about doing it. What kind of book would you like to publish? Is it something based on personal experiences, like an autobiography or memoir? Is it something based on professional experiences, like a how-to book or sales and marketing or something like that? Or is it maybe a combination of the two, where you want to do some sort of leadership training or talking about, coaching and adding the stories of other people? Liz, what do you think?
Well, especially for first-time authors, low-hanging fruit is the operative phrase. You want to write about what you know, and you have basically two pools to draw from. You have your own personal experiences and you have your professional expertise. And those are the two places where people generally start.
All right, let's share our results. And wow, I thought based on professional experiences would have been the top one.
I did too.
I was incorrect. But that's okay. Now, Liz, you've got an idea of what people are looking for, and so we'll launch into your presentation right now. Once I give you remote control access, and it's going to happen right now. There you go.
Okay, great. Thank you, Steve. Let me close this. Okay. First, I just wanted to tell everyone who I am very briefly. I'm an award-winning speaker, author, and editor. I've published 14 books so far. 10 of those are about American English best practices. And I've lectured all over the United States and even got a chance to lecture about American English in India, which was absolutely thrilling. Let's see if I can advance my slide. There we go. Now, I talked about expertise, and it turned out that my first book was based on a hobby. I've been collecting postcards for nearly 20 years. It started like most other people do with my hometown of Brunswick, Maine, and rumors of my voluminous postcard collection reached the ears of a publisher, and I was invited to write my first book, which led to speaking engagements in Maine. My first book led to my second book. My second book led to my third book. And I'm not sure what's happening here, Steve. So let's just see if I can advance these slides. I might turn this over to you because there we go. So my second book led to speaking engagements, and all of a sudden I had all these speaking engagements all over the country, which was very exciting and put me in the path of a lot of very interesting people. And in 2017, I was invited to do a keynote in India. Well, being the assiduous marketer that I am, I decided I would do workshops all over India about the importance and difference between British English and American English. And that led to me doing workshops all over India, which was an amazing experience and one that I cherish. So my first book led to other books for myself, but also for other people. I began to edit and publish books on behalf of other authors, most of the time first-time authors. And if there's one takeaway from this particular workshop I'd like you to recognize is that while I do think I am special, I'm not that special. What I have done, you can do too. Trust me on this. So what makes a great book? What makes a book of value? Well, first of all, you can draw from your personal experiences. And oftentimes, the most interesting personal experiences for others are, unfortunately, the toughest times for us personally. And those are times of challenge, of struggle. I edited and published a great book not too long ago. A gentleman had written about his family's great migration story and told the story in poetry. But the Great Migration, of course, was fraught with all sorts of drama and peril, and it made for fascinating reading. You can also draw on your expertise as far as a professional. And the book will give you authority, it will give you credibility, and it will open doors of opportunity. Put those two together and you have a good book. You have a book of quality. Because I'm not talking about a paper thin book that someone reads and says, gee, I'm not really different, or I don't have any insight after reading the book. We want a book that changes people, changes perspectives. So one of the first goals, if this is your first book, I'm going to suggest that basically the standard right now for the industry is a 6x9 paperback book, though you can do a different size. And you want to shoot for 150 pages. And it's going to be a perfect bound paperback book. Now, why, you say, 150 pages? It's very simple. A real book has a spine. A spine displays outward the book's title and your name. If you don't have 150 pages, what you have is a pamphlet. And we are after a real legitimate book. I do the speed networking with Don Margowski every Tuesday from 4 to 5. And I am on that call with BNI people from all over the country, and they're so interesting. I've met coaches, I've met people who are arborists, I've met people who are all sorts of consultants, and every single person who I've spoken with so far has a book inside. They are after bettering me. They're bettering me as far as my finances, as far as my health. And so everyone in these calls has a book inside him or herself. It's just fascinating to see and chat with these people. And I want to say a very smart person who I am very fond of, Robert Lauser here in Sarasota, told me that specific is terrific when it comes to BNI. And so if you're an arborist, for example, you could write a book about trees, no doubt. But what if you wrote a book about Florida trees? That's actually a better niche. But what if you drill down and you wrote a book about Florida citrus trees? Get very specific about your book, and you will have, I feel, the best result possible. There's also the opportunity, in my opinion, to collaborate. You could collaborate with somebody who is in the same profession. So someone in Massachusetts who is oh gosh, what do we do in Massachusetts, Steve? What kinds of things do people do in Massachusetts? People could be a hockey coach, couldn't they, in Massachusetts? So if you're a hockey coach in Massachusetts, it'd be nice to collaborate with a hockey coach in Washington State. How about, though, if you were a real estate agent in Florida? So I'm featuring a very successful real estate agent who's in my chapter, Carrie Baychok of Remax. Well, Carrie certainly has plenty of stories that she could share in a book form. And that would be very interesting. But what if Carrie collaborated with our home organizer? What if those two ladies got together, if Kimberly Reynolds and Carrie Baychok put their heads together and wrote a book about downsizing? A lot of people have to do that when they retire to Florida. But what if they got even more specific and wrote a book about how seniors can downsize? That's a very important topic right now and much in the news. I was reading the New York Times not too long ago, huge article about the importance of downsizing. So this is an example of collaboration. You could collaborate on your stories, you could collaborate in the content, and you could collaborate on the expense. And at the end of the process, the two of you, both of you, would be published authors.
Yeah, Liz, I have to tell you, this is my favorite idea of this so far. And I love it because think about your own contact sphere in your chapter. If this feels like too daunting an effort for just one person to do, why not collaborate and be able to promote your contact sphere outside of BNI with a published book like this?
Absolutely. I think it would be very powerful. And there's so many opportunities if you start looking at the various professions that are in BNI. My goodness, there are just scads of opportunities to really put together a great book, collaborating with another professional. I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Yeah.
Whoops, did it again. All right, I'm trying to advance this.
There you go.
Oh, good. So we've marketed this particular program as 3 easy steps to publishing a great book. And the first step is definitely to organize. But there is a pre-step that I'd like to bring up. I would definitely suggest that everyone contemplating becoming an author, go ahead and get yourname.com and yourbookstitle.com. Now, if your name is Bill Smith, I'm sure that billsmith.com is already taken. So how about billsmithauthor.com? That's something I would do strategically before I even put pen to paper, is think about getting those .coms, buying that real estate in the internet. So one of the first things you're going to try to do as you start to organize is get those stories together. And you don't have to really do too much, just general notes about what story it is that you want to tell, and gather those stories and do that over time. The second .com was yourname.com. So book title and yourname.com. You want to organize your illustrations. And that's one of the most important parts, especially for autobiography and memoir, because you probably have a wealth of photos that were taken during your wedding reception, for example. You want to use the best of the best. So begin to get your illustrations together. And it might be that you have to ask someone for illustrations that are appropriate. You might have to do some research on the internet. And think about the shelf life of your book, because a financial advisor who has his or her finger on the pulse of the American stock market and writes a book is going to have a much shorter shelf life than someone who's writing about the care of citrus trees in Florida or downsizing for seniors. Those are sort of evergreen topics. So be aware and cognizant of the shelf life of your topic. And in my opinion, time equals quality. I've seen people advertising webinars, seminars, publish a book in a weekend, and I don't believe it for a minute. I do not believe that someone can come up with a quality book over a weekend, because in my opinion and my experience, it takes time for ideas to ferment like yeast. So don't be lured into the idea of doing something quick and easy, because even though the title said easy, I might have fibbed. It's not exactly easy. So the first step of the 3 steps is to organize. And the second step is to compose. Now here you put flesh to the bones of the stories that you've been thinking about telling. You organize those stories in a coherent manner that makes sense to your readers, and you really flesh out what the stories are and how you want to tell them. And here's where you might incorporate, of course, the professional expertise with the personal stories and vice versa. The second and a half step, which I've snuck in here, is the necessary step that all too many people think that they can skip. And you can't, you just can't. You've got to hire 2 professionals. You've got to have a graphic designer. You must have a professionally produced book cover. We all know the old phrase, judging a book by its cover, and it's so true, because you can spot, in my opinion, very easily a book that's been illustrated by somebody's niece who's a talented artist. You really need to get to a professional to produce a really great looking book cover. And the second professional, not to toot my profession's horn, that you really have to engage is an editor. I can't tell you how quickly your credibility will be dinged if you have a typo in the first paragraph on the first page. And not mentioning any names, I happen to know someone who did just that. And that's not going to give anyone confidence about anything that comes afterwards. So please hire an editor who knows what he or she is doing, and that will set you on the right path to looking like the professional that you want to be. And then the third step is publish. You organize, you compose, and then you publish. This is the point of the whole exercise. If you don't publish, what's the reason that you've done anything? You've got to publish. And when you publish, you're going to want to use a current headshot. You're going to want to decide whether you do ebook, paper book, or both. And I have a client who has done 8 ebooks. She does not no longer publishes in paper. And that works for her. But I like to see, when I'm looking at an author, I like to see both paper and ebook. And I'm old school. If you can look behind me, you see my office is awash in paper books. I like the feel, I like the presence of a paper book. So I'm a big fan of paper books, but ebooks have their place. And then once you're published, once you have your book, then we get to the interesting part. Stephen King has said that it is easier to write a book than it is to market a book. Now, I'm sure it's been a long time since Mr. King had to worry about marketing his books, but that's not where the rest of us are. You need to market, and my whole business model is all about in-person marketing. So let's see if I can advance this slide so we can see. Oh, Lord have mercy. There we go. Okay, this is a client of mine, and she and I have worked on 2 books. She wrote a book about sailing the width of the country solo from Maine to Florida. And naturally, she did a lot of her marketing in yacht clubs because people who sail want to hear about other people who sail. And she had a great time. She met a lot of very interesting people, with whom she has a great deal of very profound things in common. So she loved doing her marketing and was very successful at it. And never let anyone say to you that person can market your book better than you can. It's been my experience that no one can market you as well as you can market yourself. So I like to see my authors in person, out and about. And the aspect of marketing, I think, that's very important is everyone wants to look at the bottom line. What is the bottom line of book publishing? So I wrote up some numbers here that I think are pretty realistic. A perfect bound paperback book of 250 to 500 pages is going to retail for about $20, maybe $25. So you've got a $20 retail book. It's going to cost you between $3 and $5 per copy delivered to your door. And one of the joys about publishing nowadays is you no longer have to order 500 copies to get a good price, especially if you're publishing or printing through Amazon. Amazon charges you the same price for one book as 1,000. So put it out of your mind that you have to have an initial very large upfront investment. So say you're looking at this book and you've got your in-person sales, you've got your passive sales from your website, and then you've got your speaking fees, which cannot be ignored. Even though they might be a secondary issue, speaking fees can really add to your return on investment. Now, a speaker's math is going to range from a free lunch at a nonprofit to thousands of dollars, depending on your area of expertise. So let's imagine that you are speaking to an audience of 100 people. Let's say 25% of those people buy your book. That's going to be $375. Let's just say that you've got 2 books. If you've got 2 books that are of substantially different topics, I will guarantee you that people will buy both books, because if people like you and they like your message, chances are very good that they will buy both of your books. If you have 3 books, it's the same story. And what you can do to entice multiple sales is offer a discount. That's one of the reasons I like my authors to price their books, if they're big enough, at $25, because they can have a little sign in the front of the room saying, today, special, in person, $20 a copy, 2 for $30. That kind of thing really drives people. I know it really encourages me when I'm at the checkout line in the grocery store. The same principle works when you're selling books. So all that combined, if you did 3 events when you're making that $375 a whack, and all of a sudden you're making more than $1,000 a month. And it's a book you've already written. You don't have to rewrite it. And let's take a look at the real nut of it, in my opinion. I like to use my books to get new clients. What is a new client worth to you? If your book brought you in a new client, that's a heck of a return on investment. So when I'm out and about and I'm speaking, of course, this is pre-COVID, but there's going to be a post-COVID soon, I hope. What if you do 3 events a month and you get 8 clients a month? What is a client worth to you? What is a new client worth to your bottom line? Those are the exciting numbers about book publishing, in my opinion. So to have a quality book, you need to follow 3 steps. You organize, you compose, and you publish. And of course, between step number 2 and number 3, you hire a graphic designer and you hire a professional editor. Because a book of quality is going to share insight. A book of quality is going to help people. And I think the best books are when you take a stand and you have a point of view. And it might be not the normal point of view. Normal is not a good word, but I have points of view, believe it or not, about editing that are a little bit controversial. If you can imagine editing having controversy. So the whole point of publishing a book is really, as the young people say, to become an influencer. You want to take people and bring them to your point of view. I don't believe in circumstance. Every single person on this call right now is contemplating publication in some form or fashion. If I can help you in any way, send me an email. We'll set up a one-to-one and I'll see where you are in your project. I will give you whatever advice and encouragement that I'm capable of, and we will set you on the path to publication. Because as you've seen from my own personal story, being a published author is not just game changing, it's life changing. And when BNI is behind you, the world is your oyster as a published author.
All right. Thank you, Liz. That was a great presentation, something very different that we've never done before. And I know that a lot of people have seen people with published books, and you'll see them listed on LinkedIn or wherever as their name, author of this book, right? So to me, the best thing about this is that it is used as a marketing tool to show you as a leader in your industry. And maybe a thought leader among people who are, pushing the business in new directions. And so it immediately, for me, gets my attention in terms of credibility of what you've got. And I don't think you could probably speak to that.
Well, Steve, you actually mentioned something that I wanted to focus on too. You don't have to imagine yourself isolated in some logging camp in upper state Maine with 3 months to write a book. It can be done incrementally. And Steve shared with me earlier about how he has a folder of ideas. And let me encourage you to, as you're contemplating publication, take notes, have a notebook or whatever it is you use to take notes with you 24/7, because you never know when inspiration starts. And like I said earlier, it's like yeast. All these experiences, all these thoughts, all these insights rise to the top over time. So do it incrementally, and suddenly there'll come a moment when you realize you have enough content to get started, but you do not have to dedicate a chunk of your life to do a book. You just do it over time and it will be successful.
Absolutely. No question about that. And we've got a few questions for you if you are ready.
Absolutely.
All right, let's see. I'm going to jump open to the Q&A, and it says, you didn't mention a publisher. Do you need a publisher?
Well, you're going to need a little bit more help too. And maybe your editor can help you. But one of the big things about book publishing is formatting the interior of the book. And that's quite challenging. I would not suggest you attempt to learn that, because the learning curve is practically straight up. So you will need to have someone help you there. You can technically publish by yourself. One of the things that's nice about using a small house is that you get a private ISBN number, which is the barcode number on the back that identifies the book as a unique book. Amazon will give you a Amazon ISBN, and even though there's a diminishing stigma about being self-published, let me suggest that you search out a small publishing house to help you with that last step. We are around. We are here. You can find us.
Yeah, I mean, I think the line between self-published and traditionally published is blurring a bit, because there are so many books that are crossing over from self-published books into the mainstream.
Absolutely. And if I may, that first book I showed you was my only traditionally published book. It retails for $22. I get $1.12 a copy. Now, crunch the math between what I showed you about the $20 less the $5 with the $15 profit, and think about $22 and I get $1.12. The math does not work when you are traditionally published unless you're Stephen King or James Patterson or somebody really, really big.
Yeah, and so since you mentioned two fiction authors, Jessica asks, what advice do you have for fictional content?
Fictional content and poets. Fiction authors, poets have a real tough hoe to row. It's very challenging to market fiction and poetry. And I would suggest you set up any speaking engagements that you might contemplate as how to. So for example, say you've written a Victorian bodice ripper. Okay, so you could do a program about how to write historical fiction. If you are a poet, you could do a program about poetry in the 21st century. Is there a place for it? So set them up as how to, and people will come in. And if they like you and they like your message, they'll buy your book.
All right, great. What is the role of a writing coach, and do you recommend hiring one?
Are there any writing coaches on the call?
No, I know this. I know you don't love the idea of a ghostwriter necessarily.
Well, okay, I guess I've never had to work with someone who needed a lot of prodding. My authors generally come to me with their manuscript complete, and there's a lot of power in that. And the power comes from A, being self-disciplined, and B, I don't like to jump in early in the process, because the earlier I jump in, the more the book starts to become mine. I need to have my author at a place where he or she has done everything that they can, and it's as finished as possible, and I come in at the very end. And so I maintain the author's unique voice. Writing coaches, I guess they'd work for some people. I go to Weight Watchers every week, so there are places for coaches, absolutely. And perhaps if that's what it takes, if you need to have a writing coach to get your book out, do it.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Okay. Patrick asks, does the book have to be about your business, or can it be about anything in general?
Anything in general, Patrick. My goodness, there are almost 1 million books published every single year by single authors. So there's a whole bunch. Now, I will say that one of the biggest areas is children's books, and I will say that would be a formidable task to market a child's book. That there's so many books coming out, so varied topics, really well illustrated. That's going to be very challenging, along with poetry and fiction. Absolutely. Yeah.
So as you're saying that, Linda jumps in with, I would like to write a children's book. Do you have any advice?
Oh, Linda, my dear, be prepared. That's about all I can say, because that's so hard.
It's a huge market.
It's a huge market. And again, I think if you niched it so that it was about a child in Maine and Florida with a unique point of view, it's just everyone. There's so much competition. So much.
True. And I think you have to have great art as well with a children's book to really catch people's eye.
Absolutely. They've got to be spot on.
Yeah. Okay, so let's see. Great tip about getting the .coms. They're so inexpensive to get. And then the question, what was the second .com?
Okay, so your name.com and yourbookstitle.com. And as Steve mentioned, they are inexpensive. GoDaddy is selling them for, I think, $9 a year. So even if, for example, you have 3 book titles that you're mulling over, go ahead and grab them. It's not a big investment, but you are going to want to have that platform. Even if it's just a landing page that pushes someone off onto your main website, or even pushes someone over to Amazon, you really do want someone who Googles yourbookstitle.com to come up with something immediately that enables them to buy the book.
Right. Okay. Sebastian asks, can we get Liz's email?
Sebastian?
Mm-hmm.
Slides, got it. That's it.
I love that Liz has included the pricing for us to be realistic. So many others refuse to share that information.
Well, I think those are realistic numbers. Those are numbers that I've seen over the past 10 years that I've been doing this. And it's not just that I'm doing it, I'm setting up my authors. And one of the big challenges too about when you go out and speak, you can't give away the entire book. So how do you tease out a thread of the message? For example, I just published last year a 94-year-old gentleman's memoir about his experience in World War II, which includes being at the gates of Dachau, the Dachau concentration camp, and seeing everything. So when he and I have done the few in-person events that we've been able to do, we've teased out that Dachau experience and talked about it, even though that's just a part of his book. And I'm telling you what, he packs the room, the lines snake around the room when he goes to sell his book. And that can happen to you too, but it's challenging to tease out that one element and build a program around it.
So Linda says, that was great. I feel like we can do it. We must meet here in Sarasota for a one-to-one someday soon.
That would be great, Linda. I'd love it.
Okay, let's see. Raquel says that she met you in speed networking and did a one-to-one.
Great.
And says you are a wealth of knowledge and very helpful in expanding ideas.
Thank you, Raquel. That's great.
All right. Oh, this one's to me. Priscilla says, I have a digital folder. I use Google Docs to keep my notes and brainstorming. Yeah, I think that's a great idea to keep everything organized so you don't lose any of those ideas. I'll tell you, I have, back in the day, at a college, I was managing Blockbuster video stores. And someone said to me, you could write a book on your experiences managing a Blockbuster video store, and you would probably sell a lot of books. And I'm like, you know what? Not a bad idea. Okay, let's see. Priscilla says, Namecheap has them for less than $10. Okay, if you're interested, send me a link. Okay, so that's Priscilla. You see her in the chat there. And I think that is the end of our questions. All right, so Liz, thank you so much for this one. Another great webinar. Those of you might want to point your cameras at those 2 QR codes. So you can get links directly to Liz's website and her BNI profile if you want to connect there. And again, thanks so much to Holly Hearn for creating a beautiful presentation, as she does all the time. All right, thanks everybody, and we will see you all next time on the webinar. Take care.
Thanks so much, Steve.